And hello again, boys and girls. Welcome back to our channel, and it's of course your host Marley Startled. And today we have now really finished all the story missions for the Scorched of DLC. Well, I've finished playing them all, and so it's time for the review. So too long didn't read. You don't want to sit through 30 minutes of me going on about nothing mission by mission. It's very fun. Highly recommend you get it. It's got a nice blend of different missions, going from large scale to tactical levels, where in some missions you'll be sort of doing a tactical sort of middling force, which gives you sort of room to lose troops and is quite more forgiving. On other missions you've got smaller, more tactical, really small tactical squads, which you can't afford to lose. Other missions you've got some sort of large scale offensives. It's really just more of the same from sort of the original mission sets, but there are 4 missions which are interesting areas, and the level design is wonderful. There's certain level designs that are certain missions that are extremely painful because they really wanted to simulate street fighting. But without further ado, for what it is, for the price, I would recommend getting it. But now we're going to do a breakdown of our mission by mission sort of review of each mission. So without further ado, let's begin. So here we have our first mission, the Siege of Sevastopol. So in this mission, you effectively take control of one of, I believe, 3 squads, where 3 sort of regiments, with your main aim to take the main battery Sevastopol, which is over here. In this mission, you have to first initially move forward and secure the front line along this route using whatever equipment you spawn with, and depending on which regiment you have different equipment, before eventually conducting a large-scale offensive on the main city itself, or the main defense itself. At the same time, you of course got your lovely mortar that comes in, which of course you're about to see is a very cheeky weapon. So if we just demonstrate it, a little bit of mortar here, perhaps a little bit of mortar here. Of course, it really just brings, as a level, it sort of brings the best parts of Stalin's big guns with another sort of tedium of constantly dying and repeating. So of course there is a certain level of tactical ability, you can't YOLO, and of course the game does initially spawn all your troops along this single front to trick you into YOLOing across the entire line, but you really don't want to do that. Instead, it's a case of sort of slowly but surely breaking your way through, using the equipment used in concentration, and eventually when you do come across a hard point, perhaps a set of mortars, you do bring forward the artillery pieces and mortar itself to blow open the route forward. It's a fairly unique level. It's a bit micro-intensive because of the troops needing to be revived without getting the equipment, because there's no respawn mechanic. And of course there is a little bit of padding at a part of the game where you've effectively got to sort of demine this entire route, which sort of pads this level rather significantly. So you demine from here all the way over here, which does pad the level quite a bit. On the other hand though, of course, there is enough flexibility, as you can see, to lose troops at the start of a mission while not being sort of soft locked out the rest of the game. It's a fun mission that involves sort of a variation between sort of low-level tactics to large-scale tactics, with only some frustrating parts being, of course, the mine layer padding, and of course the eventual nightmare that is the mortars as you get further up the line. Still, certainly a fun level. There's actually some mortars here, and it's a good middle ground between the large-scale explosions, using massive guns, and still requiring some degree of tactical control. Of course, yeah, there are things I would have liked to see in the DLC. Perhaps I would have liked to have seen the AI units potentially taking control of a part of the front, and you taking control of the right front, and the AI pushes on the left and you push on the right. But as a level, it's a pretty self-explanatory assault level where you've got to break through enemy lines and eventually, of course, take the positions. It can lead to some tedium on towards the end of the level, where, of course, there are the hidden lone enemies located in these bunkers, which either glitch out and you can't really find the last guy because you have to kill certain individuals in each area to capture a certain point. And of course, that means that it often leads to you aimlessly wandering around trying to find the last fellow to shoot. But as a whole, it's a very fun, unique level which has some degree of replayability because you can be playing with different units as you progress. And apart from a few caveats, you know, a bit of the reviving micromanagement such as here, and of course the fact that you eventually the mortar will need to move forward over all the way up to hit the new positions, then of course you're going to have a bit of a pain there. But as things go, it's a nice level, and I really enjoyed using the mortar because you've got more to play with while you're waiting for the mortar to reload. It's not as tedious as the finished mission Stalin's Big Gun, where you spend the entire sort of mission waiting and waiting and waiting for the next reload. Anyway, that's it. Altogether a fun mission, good tactical levels, highly recommend, and a lot better than Stalin's Big Gun. Moving on. So here we are at the Clash of Narva. So in the Clash of Narva, you have to initially do reconnaissance in force, breaking through the enemy lines with certain sort of light tracked vehicles, and then eventually, of course, retreating after getting the supplies back over to your main base. This is a good old-fashioned defense mission where you need to hold out against a horde of Russians that progressively gets stronger and stronger and more difficult to destroy, and it's all about placement. This means it can be a wonderful level of course, watching the sparks fly, and of course eventually it evolving, depending on how well you do, into sort of street by street warfare as you try and blow up enemy tanks with whatever equipment you have left. It's a fairly challenging level. I think the good thing about this level is it sort of how do I put it? It appeals to all sorts of players. It has that initial middling tactical level with the assault. Then of course you have that large scale defense towards the end, where of course you have that where you have sort of a solid 20 minutes or so, or 30 minutes or so of absolute carnage, where you're moving around, blowing things up, planting mines, and trying to hold the line against the inevitable hordes of Soviets. And then of course eventually you do your counterattack, where you get some respawning troops and you can deploy more tanks and so on and so forth, and you can use captured tanks to counterattack. As a level, it really just has everything you want. It's got the sort of large-scale combat. It's of course got wow, these guys are facing the wrong way. Someone cares with you, isn't it? It's got the large guns, the large tanks. It's got air with anti-air. It's got mines, and it's on a certain, it's got the right sort of scale, not to be a laggy mess. But it's something very enjoyable to watching these tanks slowly break down and troops trying to evacuate, things like that. And of course, eventually it gets to the stage where this is really going to wind me up. I shouldn't put that many troops there. Oh well. Eventually it gets to the stage where the sheer scale of amount of troops and the artillery strikes and the amount of tanks slowly does wear down your lines. Of course, after the 20 minutes of defense, you'll be told to withdraw, which leads to a very interesting paradigm about whether you sort of hold fast and try and counterattack against the Soviet waves, or how well have you been doing to retreat back with your troops, and do you leave some troops behind to hold off the encroaching Soviet hordes. It's a very interesting level. I liked it because of that sort of retreat mechanic. You do feel the chaos or the stress if you're struggling in the level of trying to retreat all your good equipment, especially the packs. We're trying to retreat those back before being overrun. Watching the iconic moments of a single pack you've decided to leave behind, holding up entire hordes of Soviet troops, running out of ammunition. It's just a really fun level where it's large scale, and you don't really have to do a lot after you've done the initial build up. Like any level in Men of War, or not Men of War, Gates of Hell, it's really just a case of can you put if you prepare ahead of each section of the mission, you'll normally be very far ahead, and putting down some mines and that can make the level very easy. Altogether, it's a really fun level, and I would highly recommend it. The only issues I've had with it have been real minor issues. Sometimes the planes that do the bombing runs are a bit of a nightmare to shoot down, even with AA, and even then there's not really anything wrong with this mission, because in terms of actually completing the missions and completing the levels and moving forward to the next sections, it's pretty self-explanatory and pretty easy to do, and it's just a really enjoyable mission just to see the pure chaos. I suppose I've never really felt too challenged, but that's because I'm used to Cold Armed Gates of Hell in regards to sort of large-scale missions. I sort of know what to do, but I would have liked to see more infantry support, maybe some human wave infantry warfare, because really what really makes a assault successful in Gates of Hell is that infantry support moving forward. But because most of it's a tank wars with the occasional infantry soldier, it means that, well, you really aren't at much of a risk of being overrun unless the enemy armour gets a few lucky pot shots off, which is very rare. I must admit, very, very rare indeed. So, altogether, a fun level, unique, well, not a particularly unique level, but it's a good old-fashioned level that encompasses all the best parts of Gates of Hell, with, of course, the new equipment, such as the... Did it already die already? I think it did. It's a shame. There was a flak panzer and things like that. Yeah, it's over here. So on fire. Oh no, it's here. Such as this bad boy, the SCKZ. Only issues I would say is perhaps some more manpower would be nice, like some infantry warfare as well, as opposed to just tank spam. And of course, I would have liked to see sort of more devastating artillery strikes and so on and so forth. But it's a fun level. So here we are at Carpathian Turmoil. This is the third level in the Ostfront campaign, which sees you and a very band of sort of soldiers moving forward to secure this bridgehead. Once you've secured the bridgehead, crossing over here, here and here, then there's sort of a early soft time limit of moving through the supply trucks to the end of the level before holding out on a defensive map. It's a fairly tactical level. Your troops don't respawn, but you do get reinforcements such as the lovely Panther, and of course it's mostly the pressure comes from the light tanks and the light Soviet infantry that comes when you're trying to move your supply trucks forward. So instead of having a time limit to move the supply trucks forward, what tends to happen is you end up with light tanks spawning everywhere. If your supply trucks aren't supported, then of course what happens is they get blown up. But it wasn't a particularly difficult level. We just got the supply trucks and drove them. Instead of driving them all the way down here, you just drove them all the way down here. It's another tactical level which has again a lot of wonderful terrain. I was very impressed by the sort of the rolling hills and scale of the map, and of course the colour palette. I'm used to sort of seeing white and brown, but this sort of greeny colour was very sort of attractive, unique to sort of levels, which I quite liked. Of course, once again, it has a good blend of sort of low scale tactical assaults, leading to sort of large scale tactical level sort of defensive lines, and of course it's a level that again really sort of promotes placement and sort of defensive terrains and topography. As long as you can set up a defensive structure, or as long as you can set up defensively, you can normally sort of hold off rather well in this level. And as you can see here, it isn't too difficult once you've actually set up defensively to cause an absolute hell's highway for the Soviets. It's I would really treat this level sort of like the ski resort level, but on a larger scale from the Ostfront campaign, where it's really just a case of just, again, tactically moving forward, making sure your troops are resupplied, and I really enjoyed the actual taking of the town and the actual movement of the supply trucks through. It was a bit of micromanagement help because the AI is a pain, but I just really liked the ability to have to set up these massive sort of loose defensive fortifications and holding off against the never-ending hordes of Soviets, but not to the point where it was just completely unbeatable like some of the German tanks in the Finnish campaign, which were an absolute nightmare to deal with. Here, you can normally your anti-tanks and pen those to the tanks, and your Panther can do a lot of the work. The only caveats I would have is that little bit of micromanagement at the start of the game with the supply trucks. Sometimes it was a nightmare trying to make them move through because they were horribly slow, but if you took direct control and just crossed them over here, it saved you a lot of time and a lot of risk of moving them up north. Things to improve it, I don't really think it really is what it says on the tin. It's just a lovely designed map with a really interesting sort of premise about sort of mid-range, mid-level fighting that really does complement the palette of the other missions which we've seen so far. Whereas, of course, Sevastopol was nearly the majority of it was tactical level. You've got a good blend of tactical and large scale, and of course, this level is a sort of a tactical level in the Scorched Earth DLC. I can't really complain about it. I know these guys haven't got any ammunition, and I did enjoy the different setting and a different location, and of course the terrain. I'm so used to flat terrain in the Soviet campaign. It kills me inside just to see so much flat terrain over and over and over and over again. So it was nice to actually play on a level that had a lot of verticality on it. And I really enjoyed it. It's again, because the Soviet infantry are pretty good, so pound for pound you'll normally knock out what was I saying? The German infantry is really good, so pound for pound you can normally knock out the Soviet infantry pretty easily. You've got some really good tanks that can be your real big force multipliers, and you've also got all that lovely terrain to set up on. It's a solid map, and I highly recommend giving it a go. Yeah, it's a solid complementary mission type for the DLC. So this is the final offensive as part of the Scorched Earth DLC, the final mission for the German campaign, and it sees you again pushing through on a tactical level with tanks and armor and infantry support over to capture supplies, ammunition, repair hubs and fuel. And of course, eventually once you do take all the objectives, a bit like the Kursk offensive mission, you then have to withdraw back to original defenses and hold out. What makes this level unique or different compared to, say, the other pushes and pull missions is that you will often be spending a period of time sort of, you've got a soft time limit basically. Your tanks don't have a lot of ammunition, they don't have a lot of fuel, and so you need to be pushing aggressively to get your tanks as far up in the line as possible before they run out of that fuel so they can actually bring that force multiplier to bear. And that sort of makes the level unique and means it's rather it forces you to be a bit more aggressive. You can't just like be very you have to do the opposite of being that tactical, slow-paced sort of play style. You've got a certain time to get your tanks up. Your tanks need to get up as soon as possible, move them up, and it means it can lead to a very chaotic sort of period of combat where you're just moving troops up as much as you can, moving your panzer grenadiers up as much as you can, just throwing troops out and hopefully getting them as close into the front line as possible. Of course, there are some caveats. So, of course, like any sort of Gates of Hell or Men of War game, you can always slow down and get some fuel from the destroyed tanks or repair the enemy tanks. But what really makes the level sort of unique is that sort of soft time limit on fuel and ammunition, meaning that you do have to push hard, and if you don't push hard, you're going to be in a world of pain very quickly as you slowly run. Your tanks effectively become burdensome earbuds and pointless, and your troops get left without tank support. Of course, eventually it does get to this sort of the scrounging stage where you do get supply and you can move your tanks back, and it's a certain higher level of tactical skill. Then of course, oh wow, that blew up. Then of course the usual sort of Stalingrad and that, because of course you've got those heavy tanks now to support. It's also sort of complemented by that last period defensive sort of aspect of the mission, where you then of course have to withdraw and you use the captured enemy gun emplacements to slow down the enemy. A bit like the Narva in that regard, but the main selling point here is of course that sort of desperate push at the start to get as close and as far forward as possible before your fuel runs out, because if your fuel runs out, you're done for. But it allows you to use the bigger guns for this time period. You get to crack out, of course, the very useful Koenigsberg Tiger 2, and of course you get to crack out the new Wirbelwind, and of course the new. So actually, that's really what you get to crack out, and you don't really crack out a new Koenigsberg Tiger, if you know what I mean. But it's a unique level in that regard, meaning that you will at some stage be running out of fuel, and the question is how far you can push and how desperately you can advance before you do run out of that fuel. In short, it's a fun level. I would recommend giving it a go, and again, it's got enough troops in it and enough tanks in it to be rather forgiving, so you don't have to worry so much about getting wiped out within seconds, and you've got the infantry spawns at the start just to keep throwing those out and letting them be your passive pushers as well. In short, it's a strong level, and the only thing I would say what I would say on the review is, for this DLC, is that most of the levels are more of the same in terms of terrain and playstyle and type. It's more of the same. It's just like push, attack, and advance. That's for most of the missions, and that's not necessarily a bad thing if the same is good. And of course, this level is more of the same with a little bit of a spin in terms of supply and logistics. And it's not necessarily a bad thing, because if you like the original sort of missions, then of course that's fine then. But I think a lot of people try and reinvent the wheel, but this mission, these levels and this game and the DLC just sticks to what it knows, with that sort of forgiving middle level tactics, large scale combat, and large scale offensives. If you were playing Tower Slaughter and you hated that low level tactics and getting bullied by superior forces, then of course these missions will be much more to your liking. Because in these missions I never felt, apart from one or two missions which were thematically supposed to be difficult, I never felt overwhelmed, or I didn't feel like there was an unfair advantage given to the Soviets or given to the enemy. Anyway, that's it. Anything else I would add to this mission? No, it's a pretty good mission. I liked it. I liked the ability to use the Koenigsberg Tigers to move up the armor, and it's again it can really get the endorphins going when you do use captured sort of enemy tanks or enemy emplacements to slow down the Soviet counterattacks. Of course, again, like any cold armed game, if you do prepare before the next phase, it can become extremely easy to play the levels. For example, if I knew that a counterattack was going to occur, I would stop before I completed the last objective, prepare all these tanks, withdraw them back to the defensive line, and then start the next level or start the next mission. But it's still fairly challenging, and it's still pretty fun to play, and I find that these levels never really felt too unfair, and I felt like I always stood a chance, and it wasn't a save scum hell. But yeah, I highly recommend it, and really not too shabby. So now we'll move on to the Soviet missions. And welcome to Pavlov's house. So Pavlov's house is a tactical mission which sees you and a small squad of troops move through the mission, first capturing a supply dump, then of course capturing Pavlov's house, and then eventually holding off against these hordes of enemy tanks. before, once completing that, committing a final assault to take enemy artillery located beyond. This is sort of your cold summer tactical level, but without the hassle of being stealthy. So it's small scale, even very small scale tactics with like a squad of 5 or 6 men initially, before coming up to about a squad of 10 or 20. And it's all very live action, so it's all about fire maneuver, flanking enemy positions, and soldier placement. Of course, when you do get into Pavlov's house, you do get attacked by hordes of tanks, which, if you haven't set up properly, will just demolish you and overrun your positions. And there are individuals that you do have to keep alive in this mission, such as Sniper Anatoly and Yakov Pavlov, which I think was a bit tedious because there's no real. It doesn't add anything to the game by having those 2 soldiers be VIPs. It just means that now I've got 2 soldiers out of combat, because the way the combat works, I may as well just hide them. So as you can see here, Pavlov, who here he is, and that sniper spent most of the level out of combat and hiding, because of course I don't want them to die, because then that's a mission fail. It's a challenging level, because this is one of the levels where you are outgunned and outpaced, and your PTSD or PTRs won't be able to knock out the panzers, and then it gives you PTSD. But it's a level that really is about placement and individual soldier micromanagement. Where you have to have your individual soldiers hidden throughout the map level, and when you have the opportunity, when you do see a tank that does overstretch or get too close, then you run out of blow up those tanks with anti-tank grenades. It really just shows you the. I don't know how historically accurate it is, but if it was historically accurate and they did fail a lot of tanks at Mr. Pavlov's house, then it can just show the sheer extent of the nightmare that was trying to hold it, and the sheer sort of tenacity of the defense. But I think this is a mission that overstays its welcome. After holding Pavlov's house, it then forces you to move forward and take out these artillery positions. Of course, that is an absolute nightmare. So even though the level was quite forgiving at the start, because the AI finds it difficult to take Pavlov's house, I don't know if AI infantry can move in and take it, or whether or not it's just a case of hide inside and shoot anyone that comes in. Eventually you do lose troops, and the last part of the end is a bit of a nightmare, because you've then got to repair whatever's left, and it's just a bit time consuming, because your tanks will take the position, but if it's you're already against insurmountable odds. The fact that you've survived this feels a bit like an anticlimax, and it's a bit of sort of tick box exercise where, oh, have you still got enough troops to be combat capable? If demonstrate this by taking this position. And that I found rather tedious, because this was the main event. I didn't really care much about this. Of course, as you know, I'm not much of a fan of low-level tactics in the Gates of Hell sort of universe. I don't particularly enjoy that sort of thing, but in this level I did enjoy it. I did enjoy sneaking up on enemy tanks and blowing them up. I did enjoy the tanks, the anti-tank grenades bouncing off the enemy tanks as they drove off, and me getting mown down. It was a fun tactical level, and I think it helps with the fact that the level design is wonderful, allowing soldiers to sneak through these positions and catch unsuspecting tanks, which really makes it quite fun level. Once you learn that it's not a case of traditional defensive lines, and it's a case of irregular warfare of lone soldiers jumping up and throwing grenades, isolated and so on and so forth, the level becomes doable. But the only thing I would say, it does overstate its welcome with that last artillery piece destruction, because it doesn't add anything. It leaves you busy waiting as you repair tanks and sit around doing very little of anything. And of course, the other caveat was these soldiers or these snipers and so on and so forth that were that really they added nothing, making these guys VIPs. Either let's make it so when they get shot, you just have a little text box saying that they've been wounded and then they're taken out of combat. That a mission failed for keeping these guys alive. All that does is it makes you move that soldier to like the corner of the map and hide it, and then you take that soldier and move it to the corner, or you move it to the bottom right of the building and hide it. It doesn't really add anything to the game, which I find a bit tedious. But altogether, it was, again, what I'm finding with these missions is each mission complements the mission preceding it. And so we've had those sort of middle tactics, large-scale defences, large-scale offensives from the German tree, Now we've had that sort of that tactical level from the Soviet tree, which I think is really good. I think it's really good. Altogether, a good tactical level for your tactical players who want to go against unsurmounting odds and want to sort of do that individual soldier maneuver, which the larger scale combat doesn't provide. So it's a solid sort of a solid level. And welcome to Street by Street, an absolute nightmare level that sees you moving around enemy defensive positions to try and take out the city centre and capture positions. It is a nightmare of a level, as you're probably going to see. It's just pure chaos, and the big thing with it is it's all urban warfare. It is a mini Stalingrad, and the one thing even though I found the level so painfully difficult, because of all the dead zones, ambushes, tank traps, and so on and so forth. One thing I did find about the level was the fact that it was lovingly made. It was a really well-made level in terms of actual level design. Every single corner has a death trap. Every single corner has a pack hiding out. Every single corner has some troops hiding in the windows to shoot down upon your soldiers. You really do have to move through methodically and slowly. If you try and move through fast and sort of YOLO it or mob rush, you will get mown down. Your best units will be destroyed, and of course you will fail. There we go, that's what I wanted to see. But yeah, you start the level all the way over here. If you spawn the map, and then eventually you have to move all the way. Ooh, where do you start? Over here. Eventually you've got to move all the way because of these barricades all the way along. Each corner, of course, filled with anti-tank guns, reinforcing enemy tanks, infantry hiding in the windows. These corners are filled with sort of infantry and anti-tank troops in the windows, tanks hiding behind or shooting over the barricades if you try and go past. There's one cheeky part of the level here that if you try and move a tank over, you will get shot at by an anti-tank gun hiding over in this position, or an anti-tank platform hiding in that position. It appears like a very short map, but it's a really big grind with mortars firing down upon you, enemy artillery positions, enemy tanks popping around corners to blow you up. And it's really a case of bringing the right tools for the job, making sure you've got support troops, making sure your tanks are getting supported, making sure your tanks are capable of knocking out the guns at long range. And of course it means that it can be a slog, because it is a slog level, but it's supposed to be a slog level to demonstrate the sheer nightmare that was, of course, urban combat. Even though your tanks are the most powerful at knocking out the enemy armor and knocking out the enemy IT positions, they will often get damaged, or they will often have a gun damaged or a track damaged, and then you need to repair it, and then you need to wait. This can lead to sort of being soft locked, where if you lose your tanks too early or they get blown up, then of course you can't bring them forward anymore, and it's GG no re. But it also means that you really do have to take your time and move forward, and again repair enemy sort of captured vehicles like so, and move gradually forward into the map. If you try and move forward like a potato, then the level will punish you. This can be frustrating, but it's meant to be. It's meant to be that sort of urban warfare. As you can probably see, as soon as I moved that tank around the corner, that was my tank dead, to be blown up and wiped out. And so you've got to make sure you move carefully and move slowly, otherwise you will lose your best troops very quickly, and it ends up being all over from there. And that's the entire level. It's just that sort of unforgiving level placement, and you can really enjoy that level placement, just knowing that the developers have deliberately placed this level to make it unique in that regard and make every single corner a death trap. It's a small level, but it has been lovingly made. And it, again, what I'm finding about this review, or just playing the missions, is that each level does complement and does bring something slightly different. Yes, you've got your middle range tactical levels, but then you've got the Pavlov house low tactical level, then you've got this sort of level which is all about that sort of urban warfare, that cautious movement and the gradual advancing. it's really a unique level in that regard, which is really quite interesting. Frustrating, don't get me wrong. Like there's a certain part of the level where there's mortars coming down, and as you know, enemy mortars are disgusting and broken and destroy you. But it's altogether a fun one, and you do get a real sense of achievement once you complete it. And it just brings something different. It gives you a mini Stalingrad. It gives you that sort of gradual movement. I mean, I suppose what they could have done is made this a larger scale. Perhaps they could have just done a pure Stalingrad mission where you just have a big city and you've got to move through bit by bit, strip by strip, like this, by spawning more troops in or getting AI reinforcements. But for what it is, it's a small scale Stalingrad where you will have to gradually move forward, and you will, every corner is a death trap. And although there is some frustrating parts, like most of the things what let me down was the AI. Like the AI tanks and the AI have a tendency to show their rears to the enemy, or they have a tendency to, how do I put it, turn to face the wrong way and get shot in the arse. And that can make this level very frustrating. But on the other hand, if you do have good micro, and if you do succeed, eventually you'll get to a stage such as this where you are spawning more infantry in, and you do eventually overrun the positions as long as you knock out that pesky artillery piece, which you can normally do towards the end of the mission. Altogether, it gives you a really interesting experience, and it gives you that sort of reality check on urban warfare, and just demonstrates how nightmarish urban warfare is in terms of the sheer casualties and how cutthroat it was. Go around the wrong corner at the wrong time, that's you dead. Your tank goes up without infantry support, that's them dead. Oh, you just randomly walk past a window, oh, that's your entire squad wiped out. And it can lead to those frustrating moments, but it helps you appreciate the nature of the combat and the nature of the actual type of warfare that was waged. Altogether, a pretty solid level. I can't really complain about it. But of course, I would like on a larger scale. And one thing that they are missing out of right now in terms of current missions is when you have supporting infantry or supporting AI troops counter-attacking or attacking or pushing points. A bit like the Men of War level at the last Soviet level, Silo Heights. Where you had one part of the line, and then of course the AI who's on your side had another part of the line, and you had to push forward. I think it would be more interesting, and you could enjoy the combat more. But this feels like a more heavy micro level. Even though you've got large-scale troops, you must heavy micro. Otherwise, they will get quickly wiped out by enemy positions, enemy tanks, and so on and so forth. A really fun level, and one. Well, not fun, a really interesting level. I wouldn't call it fun, it's like hell, urban warfare is hell, but it's an interesting level that does like to punish the usual playstyle of YOLOs and pushes. And if you don't play the game properly or slowly and methodically like you're supposed to in urban warfare, you will suffer, as you demonstrate that one corner knocked out my best tank. So bear that in mind. So, really a fun level. An interesting level. And welcome to the Koenigsberg Cauldron. This level is, and always will be, a pain. At this level, it sees you gradually moving through the city of Koenigsberg, moving forward depending on what regiment you pick, with either sort of IS-2s and a few sort of flaming troops, and moving gradually across to take certain hard points such as the old Fort Citadel itself and eventually the city centre. At some stage you will get AI support from this position, which once you liberate will join your side. But again, it's really a bit like street to street. It's a slow, gradual sort of punch through, which eventually does culminate into sort of a middling tactical offensive. If I would give it, it's very close to Sevastopol, the siege of Sevastopol, but in the urban setting, where eventually you move forward with your troops and gradually sort of take things bit by bit. It's nowhere near the large-scale chaos of certain defensive maps, but it does have its good parts, being that, of course, you are playing with late-game modern equipment, and of course you do have that lovely artillery bombardment, which is actually pretty useful. Of course, like any of these sort of levels, because you don't get any respawns, tank is destroyed, that's you sort of done for slash doomed, and so you do have to be rather careful with all your equipment and your troops. And if you don't, like I'm doing now, you run the risk of being completely annihilated. But I really enjoyed the level design in this. Again, you can tell it's been very lovingly made to sort of demonstrate this sort of urban warfare. But again, what lets it down, as you can see, is that sort of AI micromanagement, because the AI has a tendency not to, how do I put it, react quick enough to higher priority threats. Still, it's a unique one that sees, again, a bit like that Street to Street, where if you do YOLO in, you will lose your troops early on, and the level will become immeasurably more difficult, and it does lead to this sort of slow grinding forward again. It's not like, say, Narva or levels where you can spawn in more reinforcements. This is a level that promotes slow and steady, so you'll be going through periods of time where you aren't moving anything forward, and when you are moving things forward, you're moving it slowly and methodically forward. You aren't moving troops without support, because if one loss of one tank can prove, of course, very, very unpleasant. But it's sort of tactical. What I would say is this is instead of more of a tactical map. Of course, you do have infantry, but you do have an ample amount of tanks that sort of adds that sort of low-level tank tactical combat. So instead of tactical combat of infantry, you're doing mostly tactical combat of tanks, with infantry support being your highs. And that can lead to really fun examples. Normally when you're doing tank combat, you're fighting with massive hordes of enemy tanks. You've got a massive horde of tanks yourself. Whereas this, it can be tank on tank combat, and it can be really fun just to really play with the IS-2, because I don't think you really get much hands on the IS-2 early on, because of the nature of the levels in the first Soviet tree. But here, with the sort of different regiments, you can pull out the heavier hitting weapons for the Soviets. Of course, one thing I will note out is, again, it's very micro-dependent, because of course you've got to take direct control, because the AI has a tendency of not prioritizing targets when they should, as demonstrated here. They're simply not prioritizing targets. Also, of course, it's one of those levels that if you lose a lot of troops early, you're going to have a pain, and you are going to be using your best toy, which of course will be your IS-2 and artillery pieces, a lot, and you'll be very upset if you can't get your IS-2 or artillery pieces to work. You're going to be really a broken man. But it's nothing you can't handle, and it can be a pretty fun experience. Of course, it's methodical and it's tactical tank combat with infantry support. And once you do succeed, it can be really fun going through street to street. Of course, I like having never-ending combat, and I think the best. What I found sad about a lot of these sort of tactical levels is there are big lulls between combat. There is a big space between moving forward and actually fighting, and that can mean that a lot of the time it's a lot of manoeuvring into position rather than actually fighting large-scale battles. And I think the use of friendly AI troops would help reinforce that sort of constant ongoing combat. Really, if you're fighting for a city, you should feel like there's a constant fighting going on, or it should be a constant level of sort of low-level intensity operations at the very least. Whereas, of course, you never really feel that. I think this would be a better level if the AI had control of the infantry and you had control of the tanks, and the infantry assaulted forward and you moved up the tanks bit by bit, and that would take off the pressure from from the player having to constantly micromanage. It's one of those sort of levels in game design you can argue is a good thing or a bad thing. Good thing, of course, because it gives the player more creativity and agency in how to approach the problem. I think it's a bad thing because I had to spend a lot of time jumping back and forth, micromanaging every part of the line, making sure my troops micromanaging didn't run off too far, because if I didn't, I would lose my best vehicles, which I needed for the next point. And I think this level would have been better if they'd given the control over of your soldiers to the AI, and you had control of the tanks. And the infantry was constantly moving forward. So far, we haven't seen really meat grinder maps like Citadel Heights yet. This is more of a sort of mid-range tactical level, and most of the campaign is mid-range tactical for the new DLC. But I would like to, in future, see more of that sort of large scale pseudo control where you work with the AI. It's a good example. As a DLC, there's a workshop mission called the Retaking Sevastopol, I believe, where the where you have your own troops and you also have friendly Soviet AI that horde attacks to push out the German invaders. And as the horde eventually slows down, it becomes more tactical. Another good example is, of course, penal battalions in the Men of War expansion. Altogether, it's still a pretty good level using large-scale Russian tanks, which you normally don't use in most of the missions, using the better and fancier stuff. The only caveat being it's very micromanagement intensive. But yeah, it's still a nice and enjoyable level with a good setting and a scene to it. So this is Operation Citadel, the sort of final mission of the DLC Scorched Earth for the Soviets. It's actually the third mission, but unfortunately I did not remember to save any missions from it, or save any sort of save from my playthrough of it. And it sees you, of course, building a rather large defensive network at the start of trenches, well, not trenches, of mines to prevent the inevitable attack by the Axis forces. What makes this level sort of unique is effectively you will come across armor and tanks you cannot destroy, and you will be forced to, at periods at time, to rely on infantry to knock out enemy tanks. So a good example is, of course, these fellows will probably knock out your Panzer IV heavies, but not be able to knock out your Tiger tanks. This inherently means that you'll end up in a situation where you haven't really got much of a choice but to eventually retreat further into the main city and hold off against the overwhelming tank hordes. Again, it's mostly tank hordes, not very infantry supportive, but I really enjoyed just the chaos of it, and it is a bit of a performance hitter. It does really screw up your performance playing the game because of the sheer amount of tanks and the Panzerjägers that come out and all that sort of stuff. And of course, it does lead to a lot of heavy micromanagement. Sometimes I felt like I couldn't control it because of the scale of the map. I couldn't control what was going on a large part of the time. They probably should have done this attack into segments first, because I spent most of the time having to plant more mines inside the city. Then I had to spend more time spawning more troops and sending those troops into the buildings. And then, of course, by that time, I've missed out on other combat. So it's a massive scale tank battle with hordes of tanks coming through the mountains, attacking, trying to break through. And then eventually you follow up with a counterattack of your own Katyushas, and you use your infantry to fight over every corner. And it's just really human way, just throwing troops at these tanks. Until you eventually get close enough to blow them up. And it makes it a very fun level, a very low performance level, but a level you can't really appreciate because of the way of the level design. The level design has it so that you've got to micro to be able to knock out a lot of these tanks, and you can't let the AI just do it themselves. At the same time, you're also going to be microing other things like more defensive lines, troop movements, because the AI is not going to do it themselves, and they're just going to move around in big old squads. And you've got to micromanage sort of, again, more mine laying, and then eventually the individual tank, because you'll be going up against enemy armor that is better than your anti-tank capability. This really leads to sort of situations where where the scale is great, but you have never had the time to appreciate the level. Never really time to admire and enjoy the sheer scale of the combat. And although you can counterattack and so on and so forth, it's just a tad disappointing in regards to you can't enjoy it because it's just not. It's too much going on at once, and if you want to win, then you've got to spend a lot of your time sort of handling everything. Perhaps great for a co-op campaign or great for co-op missions, but really, really, you really do struggle trying to achieve victory in this because of the because of just the sheer numbers, and you struggle to enjoy it. you can get moments where you do enjoy the combat, but not to the point where it ends up becoming. But it's not like Narva where you can sit back and watch the chaos and just do the occasional troop movement. You'll be moving troops constantly throughout all these buildings, all these towns, all the way up in the north. And if you don't, you're gonna have a bad time. Altogether, it's a great mission that was executed poorly. They should have either executed in segments or like the AI controlled parts of the front, or they should have cut the fronts into chunks and then, of course, open it up for one big final assault. Uh, it was level part. It was level design that let this sort of level down. It's great fun. Then the sheer scale is great, and the whole sort of meat grindery of it is really fun, but it's really let down by its sort of tendency to force micro. Unfortunately, with Call to Arms or most Men of War games, you will, if you want anything done properly, you have to do it yourself, and so you will have to micro large swaths of the front line. And so when you see something like this, you'll be mostly microing large swaths, and it just becomes a bit of busy work. But I can see I can see I can see its merits. I can see what they're trying to achieve, but I feel like it was achieved badly. And I think in future, it'd be great for co-op level if you can play it without a desyncing because of the sheer scale. But it just needed a bit more of a push towards making it more visually attractive rather than admiring the chaos that's going on, which unfortunately you can't do. Wish they could have fixed that by just giving you only a certain amount of troops for this entire battle, giving you a certain amount of tanks for a certain battle, and everything else is AI controlled. But sadly not. Sadly not. Anyway, that's it. Let's take a look for the end review, shall we? So, that was our Cold Arms Gates of Hell Ostfront Scorched Earth mission by mission review. It's altogether more of the same, and normally people think that's bad. People think of more of the same, they haven't reinvented the wheel, so on and so forth. That's sad, this is bad, this is a step back. But actually, when you've got a good formula and a good sort of gameplay loop like Cold Arms Gates of Hell has, more of the same can be good. Sometimes there's no need to reinvent the wheel, and each mission, although have that sort of middling tactical level, some missions have that emergent gameplay of low level tactics leading to low mid-level sort of combat. Others have that sort of defense. You do get a blend of missions that do really promote different play styles or different things people liked about the game. The only thing I would say is that some of the missions have weird padding, like the Sevastopol mission, minefield clearance, and unfortunately for the mission of Pavlov's house, there's only really one low level tactics mission. So if you do like your low level tactics like Tavis Slaughter, you won't really get that in this playthrough apart from one mission really, and if everything else is sort of mid-level tactics. But if you are willing to overlook that and you enjoy just more of the same combat and such, and you want it for the healthy price of £7.99, I think, then I would recommend getting it. It's a good mission pack, and I think when you compare it to a lot of the mission packs on the workshop, it does perform to a standard above other sort of other missions out there. That's by sheer adding of new content and new level design, which I think is really impressive, and I quite like that. Otherwise, what would be the point in playing for it? So I would recommend getting it. I would recommend getting it if you like the original missions and the original sort of storylines from the Cold Arms Gates of Hell campaign, and you want, again, middling tactics to large-scale combat. You don't want low-level Tavis Slaughter combat. If you want that, go for Finland instead. I haven't had any bugs myself, and I'm looking forward to see what more the devs put out, but I'm getting to the stage where I'm getting a little bit bored of the Soviet playstyle. Getting a little bit bored of the constant combat, the constant Soviet front. I would like to see perhaps a maybe North Africa front, perhaps I'd like to see a D-Day front or an Allied front. Just little things like that would go a long way to adding and fleshing out the game a bit more. Still, that's the end of the review. I hope you enjoyed, and I will see you all later. Adieu.